Okay, 12.3, proposed budget solutions for fiscal years 2017-18 and 2018-19.
You make the 11:30?
She's asking for public comment.
Oh.
We haven't had the presentation yet.
Okay.
Do you want me to say something?
Mr. Mayor. Oh.
People have been waiting here for more than 2 hours to make
Right after this presentation.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, tonight is our third and perhaps final budget balancing workshop for our 2-year budget cycle. During the past few months, the council has reaffirmed its longstanding budget principles, which provide guidance on long-range fiscal planning and sustainability. The staff has presented budget balancing strategies, including revenue-generating opportunities, cost reductions, and management of reserve funds in the context of short-term and long-term projections. Since our June 20th meeting, the council, community, and labor groups have sought additional data and provided proposals and alternatives that have been incorporated in the materials that are offered tonight. This evening, we seek council direction sufficient to enable the staff to bring forward a proposed citywide balanced budget on September 5th. The outline of the topics this evening will include updated budget shortfall, CalPERS pay down update, Child Development Center fee adjustment in fiscal 18-19, and proposed budget solutions. We'll move through our PowerPoint presentation with Susan Shea and provide opportunities for the council to question and obtain clarification along the way, followed then by public comment and city council decisions. With that, I would like to turn the presentation over to our finance director, Susan Shea. Mr. Mayor, if I am aware, I was made aware of the item that was raised by Joyce, and given the hour, if the council chooses to receive her specific feedback about one of the budgeted items, then this might be a good time to do it.
Before the presentation.
Well, I have a sense that there are certain very specific budget items that they're concerned about.
How does the council feel about that?
That's
at the mayor's pleasure.
Yeah, let's have that.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council members. My name is Josephine Lee. I'm a resident of Oakland, but I'm right over on the next block from the Emeryville border. I'm on 54th Street. And I'm with friends. I'm the chair of Friends of the Golden Gate Library. And we've been doing the Jazz on Sunday for 27 years. This is our 27th year. The Emeryville Council started off funding us with $5,000. Then they cut us down to $2,500. Then they moved it from the city council to the Parks and Rec Department, and now they just fund the Jazz in the Park on the Doyle Street Park. At first we were in Temescal Park until you revitalized that, remodeled that. So now we're at Doyle Street Park. And they pay just for the band in the park. That's $900. And it might seem like just a little bit. I'm just hoping that you don't cut it out of the budget, because it seems like such a little bit, but it's a big bit to us because we're on a shoestring. Most of us are just, we volunteer our time. We're a 501c3, so we don't get any money for our efforts. We all do volunteer work with the group. We pay our artists. As you can see from the program, we have a different artist every Sunday. Now, a lot of the people that attend these concerts are residents of Emeryville, and they thoroughly enjoy it. We have standing room only at the library every Sunday, and at Jazz in the Park, it's just loaded. And I'm just asking you to please find something else to cut, but please don't cut that $900. It means so much to our program, and I thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Esther Green, and I have worked with Miss Josephine for over 20
Could you use
years.
the microphone, please? We're broadcasting.
I've worked with Miss Josephine for over 20 years on this project, and the performance in the park is by the Junius Courtney Big Band that was founded in 1962. So what you would be getting for the $900 is up to like a 17-piece band. They performed every Sunday for how many years? I mean, in the park for over 20 years. So we're really hoping that you can continue to support this, because the community attendance is incredible. We don't charge any fees for admission. And like Josephine said, all of us work volunteer. All of the money goes straight to the artists. So please consider keeping that in the Park and Rec's budget. Thank you.
I would just like to say that over the 27 years that I've been involved with the program, we've always had this concert, and I don't understand how the city can't support it. So we'd like to invite every last one of you down to the Sunday night, the Sunday afternoon shows, so you can see what's happening. We also do a youth thing. So we have young musicians that come in and play. And this has just been a thing that's been supported for this long. So we're just hoping you can keep it in your heart to support it,
Forgive me. I know it's been a long day for you, but I didn't get my nap today, so and I don't usually go to bed till 12:30 or so I'm kind of behind my schedule. My name is Louis Labat. Excuse me. I live at 5 Commodore Drive at Watergate. I want to second what the two previous speakers have said. I've been going to the program that Ms. Lee has put on for the past 10 years or so, and it's an excellent program. If you went to Yoshi's to see a lot of the presenters that she has, probably cost you $50 and $25, $30, which a lot of seniors don't have, by the way. So I would urge you to find a way to cut $900, I think, in a grand scheme of things. I know you have a budget shortfall, but $900, I think, is something I hope that we can come up with. I also, because the person who was concerned about this issue, which is also under the Community Services Department, coastal cleanup. I think Emeryville should be proud of the fact that it's clean, and that coastal cleanup, which takes place once a year, I don't see a figure for that, but it's on the chopping block apparently. I'd like to urge you to find money to continue the coastal cleanup. Thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Mayor Donahue and City Council members, and thank you, City Manager Lair and Mayor Donahue, for moving us up, because I'm getting frazzled. Okay, I'm not going to repeat everything that's been said. I'll just say that I've been going to those concerts for about 8 years, and they are outstanding. If anybody is interested in jazz and blues, you hear the very best music available in the Bay Area for free on Sunday afternoons at the Golden Gate Library, but you have to come early if you want a seat. And the big band can't get squeezed into that basement, so we have this wonderful, wonderful band that performs in the park. And I request that you maintain funding. I would also like to pick up on what Lewis said. I was really surprised to see both Earth Day and the coastal cleanup on the chopping block. And I wondered if this is really what you intended to do. These are community events, and they certainly benefit the peninsula, and I imagine other parts of Emeryville too. I know that these events have been well attended, and there's been huge amounts of productivity on Earth Day and on coastal cleanup, not only in getting the trash, but also promoting values. I know that I've seen Councilmember Bouters there over a number of years. I've seen you, Diane, and there are probably other council members too who've participated. This is one of the ways we communicate values to our children. When we have these events, the children come out too, and they learn not only the environmental values, but they start to learn how to be citizens and how to be citizens that participate. So I'm wondering if you really want to cut these events. I'd be really surprised and shocked, actually, if you do. I know that you've got big budget pressures, but I think out of some of the other, I know that the Fair Work Week has a huge, big addition to the budget. I'm hearing about all these contracts. Maybe we could take $1,000 out of every contract and a couple of $1,000s out of the Fair Work Week budget and put enough in to have community events, because the Jazz in the Park, the Earth Day, the coastal cleanup, these are good for Emeryville citizens. Thank you.
Thank you.
Public comment now.
If you want to do it now as opposed to after the presentation, yes.
Okay, so we're hearing some good arguments about some good programs that the community benefits from, and I think they've made good arguments. We are a community, and we should support community events, especially the music. Sounds great. A lot of SEIU people here, and I strongly support unions, and so I support. I can't imagine us cutting our city employees. That's just wouldn't reflect Emeryville values. Yet we got to cut somewhere, it looks like. I mean, at least a little bit. I don't think we have to do draconian cuts, but I'm sitting here remembering back in 1992, there was an environmental impact report prepared for the East Bay Bridge Mall. That's the Home Depot Mall. And I read the EIR for that, and it said that we would need to offset the increase in crime that would happen as a result of building the mall. The EIR said we need to hire 12 sworn officers and then like 2 or 3 non-sworns. And so we got the mall, but we never got the cops. And the mall was supposed to pay for the cops, but we never got the cops. So I felt like I was a dirty double deal. And so I started coming here, telling the 5 council members back in the 90s, like, where are our cops? We got the mall. That's a dirty double deal. We want our cops. So I was a thorn in the side of the council, imagine that. But then move forward to the building of this mall here, the Bay Street Mall in 2000. Then after many years of me needling the council, the EIR was written for that mall, and it said there's going to be an increase in crime and as a result of the building of the mall, but we need to hire 0 cops for that mall, which is ironic because that mall has actually generated a lot more crime than the East Bay Bridge Mall, as it turns out. But so I started marveling. So one mall is 12 cops, another mall is 0 cops. So the point I'm trying to make is I don't think anybody really knows about any of this stuff. How do we know we need the police budget that we have right now? I mean, have you really delved into that? Because the cops are by far the biggest, that's the elephant in the room here, the budget room, is the police department. It's a huge amount of money we spend on cops. Do we really need to spend this much? Maybe we don't. I think you should look to cutting the police department, because that's not our community. We're talking about the community. We're talking about our Emeryville values with the SEIU and with these community events. And then our cops, Emeryville values? No, they're necessary, but they aren't our values. And maybe we don't need to spend as much as we're spending, because we're spending a huge amount there. So I think you should seriously look into cutting at the police department. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, just for clarification, the first several speakers were speaking about events that are going to be covered under special events, the budget solutions in the menu, which we'll be talking about this evening, but it's all under that one special events line.
Okay, let's start with our presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. The 5-year projection was updated with more current financial information. The budget gap is projected to be $1.1 million in 17-18 and $2.5 million in 18-19. The projected deficits remain significant in 1920 and 2021, and the amounts are $4.4 million and $6 million. The revenue growth from 2017 to 2021 is projected to be 5%, much lower than the 20% expenditure growth. The key factor related to the expenditure growth is the rising pension costs. In December 2016, the CalPERS announced that the investment return will be lower from 7.5% to 7%, and the increase in pension costs will start in fiscal year 18-19. As you can see from this chart, the increase in pension costs will last for 10 years before the costs come down. 20 years, I'm sorry. At the July 11th meeting, staff proposed to pay down $4 million of unfunded pension liabilities, $2 million for the police pension plan, and $2 million for the miscellaneous pension plan. After additional analysis, staff conclude that the general fund would achieve greater savings if we pay the entire $4 million for the police pension plan. 99% of the police staffing costs are charged to the general fund. Therefore, 99% of the savings will go to the general fund. If we pay down the miscellaneous pension plan, a portion of the savings will be allocated to other funds, such as the sewer fund and the marina fund. Is the City Council okay with only paying down the police pension plan? It's a change to the last proposal.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. At the July 11th meeting, the City Council directed staff to analyze the fee increase for ECDC using different models, and Pedro is going to present the information.
Good evening, Mayor and Council members. On the slide here, you'll see projections of 3.8%, 5%, and 10%, and you'll see in the yellow line the general fund subsidy for each of those years. We'll concentrate on 18-19 since that's what we're discussing tonight. The Budget Advisory Committee did recommend a 10% increase for 18-19. One of the things that Council also asked at the last meeting was to do a comparison of other surrounding child care facilities. And as you can see here, ranking them, the yellow that you see for ECDC is the residence fee, and the non-resident fees in the orange compared to the other centers. This is just comparing the pre-K program, just to show a little bit of an overview of it. And it kind of ranks towards the bottom three. In 18-19, we did a comparison of assuming that the schools would do a 3.8% increase each year. Again, only compares the pre-K program, and as you can see, shows where it ranks towards the bottom 3 or 4 of comparison with the other schools. The following slides also have just to show where they would rank, but I'll just go through them unless there are specific questions I can answer regarding any of those. Oops, sorry about that. Taking it back to the comparison. And this just shows the subsidy line chart where it shows if with the 10%, it keeps the 10% subsidy keeps the below $1 million each year for the center. All right. Is there any questions the council has or would like to follow up on any of the slides?
No.
Thank you, Pedro.
Next, I will present the menu of proposed cost reductions. All the items on this menu were approved by the Budget Advisory Committee last week, except for 3 items, and I will present those items later. I would like to see if the City Council has any questions about this menu before we get into discussions. Do you have any questions about the items on this page?
Yes, well, it's actually not on this page, so we can keep going.
Okay. Oops, sorry. What about this page?
The question I had was about Jazz in the Park. Is it $900 really the only cost, or is there all kinds of other city expenses that go along with that?
It's part of the $13,000, and Pedro can speak to that.
Right. The main big cost is the $900 for that event for paying for the group. There's very minimal cost for us on that day. It's all organized by the Friends of Golden Gate Library.
Can you answer for the coastal cleanup? Same question.
Coastal cleanup does have a lot of volunteers, and there is some minimal staffing with that. I don't have a specific amount on me right now for that one, but a lot of it's volunteers for that event also.
Thank you.
Should I move on? Okay. The cost reductions consist of contracts and other operating costs, staffing allocation to other funds, vacant positions, and occupied positions. The cost reductions amount to $1.1 million in 17-18 and $2.2 million in 18-19. As Pedro mentioned earlier, the Budget Advisory Committee recommends a 10% increase for the ECDC fees in 18-19. The Budget Committee also recommends filling the vacant police services position and eliminating the overtime. They also recommend retaining the animal services contract with the City of Piedmont. With those proposed changes, the projected deficit is $90,000 in 17-18 and $466,000 in 18-19. Would the City Council like to take public comments before I ask the questions on the slide?
I would, yes.
That seems like a good idea.
Yes, please.
Okay, public comments.
I've had another speaker donate time to me, so there's 6 minutes. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. Amber Evans, Community Development Coordinator for the city. I've spoken to you before about some other strategies, and I'm going to dive down into them a little bit more tonight. In your staff reports, you've seen repeated numerous times that current year expenditures should be supported by current year revenues. Only one-time revenues should be used for ongoing expenses, but you really haven't talked about a corollary, which is that current year revenues should support current year expenditures, and only if current year revenues have met the expenditures of those years should they then be used for capital expenditures or one-time expenses or to fund reserves. This has been a backwards approach to how you invest in staff. What if you adopted this policy? It breaks none of the city's existing policy rules. It might reduce the capital projects. Would that be a problem? That seems to be the conversation we keep shying away from. The current CIP has $100 million of projects in it. There is simply insufficient staff in the city of Emeryville to complete that CIP program in the time you're seeking to do so. We will have a slower drawdown of funds. What if we use some of that available funding for the shortfall you just heard about to keep all staff members working for the next 2 years with an expectation we would have third-year revenue that they could continue with new revenue sources addressing the gaps we see in future years? What if in the next 3 years, as you expect on new ongoing and one-time revenue to be generated, not limited to, but including one-time revenue from transfer fees we know properties are selling in the next few years, general tax, or I think we were saying benefits from reading between the lines from cannabis businesses, and up to $80 million in bonds. All of these will need staff time. Even if you don't pay for staff time with them, you will need staff time to do them. And some of them may be able to pay for staff time. Should we wish to build the Art Center, as promised in the current CIP, the top priority of the recently commissioned Public Art Master Plan, we need to staff that to either broker a deal with a private developer, or we need to spend more public money and more staff time to build it and broker a user group. Furthermore, the report that you have tonight suggests that economic development is critical to retaining and attracting businesses to increase the city's tax base. The Economic Development Division has not one but 2 of its 5 staff proposed for layoff in 18-19, and I bet we could expect both to leave in 17-18 rather than face gaps in their own employment. How would the remaining 3 people and 2 interns manage Fair Work Week, build the Art Center, implement the Cultural District, the facade program, assist small businesses, implement the paid parking, create a bond program, then implement it, build $40 to $80 million of housing, retain and attract businesses to increase the city's tax base, enact a general tax on cannabis business? Oh, and let's not mention the current work plan prior to these new initiatives. With little to no help from Public Works, as Public Works staff build $100 million, minus the parking and the Art Center that we're doing over in EDH, with the 3 engineers they have on staff and a half-time consultant. So let's use the general fund, unassigned reserve funds that were identified here, borrowing from the vehicle replacement funds, as here, using tax increment funds. Figure out what a number you feel comfortable with is. Maybe to retain all staff. And we can use general capital or unrestricted housing fund or restricted housing funds to fund economic development staff time spent on the parking, the Art Center, and housing development, just like you've done with Public Works staff in the budget menu as you have it. Fund the positions that in this way, and you can create surplus general funds for the position in economic development that is not eligible for capital costs. So meaning staff in EDH that are working on capital projects have general fund taken out of the funds paying for their staff time, and now you have general funds that can pay for the work that's going to the Fair Work Week, which needs general fund support. If we need to borrow from the economic uncertainty reserves, to keep these staff that are going to address the search for revenues, then why not write a second policy to address the concerns you've expressed? That revenues must be used to fund staff integral to the development of positive future revenue, and when reserves are used for such purposes, they must be the first funds repaid with the revenue. Or if it's restricted revenue, then a like amount needs to be paid by the general fund once that revenue is flowing in. The proposals in this budget cutting staff remain a penny wise and a pound foolish. Thank you.
Timed that up perfectly.
Good evening, council members. I'm Samantha Golden, and I'm speaking on behalf of the parents tonight. I had several parents that tried to attend the meeting, but since they have small children, they all had to leave. So I've been communicating with the parents all this week in anticipation of this meeting. And what I wanted to say is that when you look at the chart that shows that we're among the lowest tuitions in this area, that only shows a partial picture. Some of those programs, you know, they're Montessori programs that they just cost a lot more to run, and it's really comparing apples to oranges. I don't think that raising our fees 10% would drive business away. You know, whatever the fees we post, people are going to come that can afford it. You know, I'm really concerned with our community that we have of parents who can barely afford, you know, they've budgeted a certain amount for tuition, and a 10% really creates a hardship. I've actually already had one parent who had to back out of enrolling because of the fee increase. And, you know, for parents that have two children in the center, you know, this could be an increase of $500 to $600 a month in their tuition payments, because, you know, it could be like $200 to $300, you know, per child increase with these. Like, for example, the infant rate would be going up about $200 a month, you know, so, and then with another, that's going from this current year to the 17-18 year, and then it would be in addition to that in the next year. So, you know, over the course of these 2 fiscal years, it's a lot for parents. So at the committee meeting, the budget committee, they discussed, you know, trying to do some kind of a scholarship fund to help offset the costs for current families. And I would really hope that instead of deciding on a 10% increase now for the next year, we can look more into those solutions. You know, the parents are under the understanding that fees will go up, and the 3.8% cost of living increase is understandable, but hitting us with, you know, 10% 2 years in a row, it just creates a lot of hardship for the parents. So thank you.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, council members. Sorry. I'm here to talk about, my name is Marcy Greenhut. I'm in Public Works Department, Environmental Programs. I'm here to talk about the quality of the staff that I work with, and I've been working with since I started here in 2007. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that the caliber of the work that gets done here is really, in my mind, very impressive. And I remember when Sabrina Landreth was here and she had a meeting with all the staff, and she called our staff high functioning, and I thought, you know, that's right, she gets it. This is a real high functioning staff, high producing. The work that gets done here is really top notch, and I'm really proud and I'm impressed like every day with the people that work here. So I think it's a big contribution to what makes Emeryville unique, and what it's a big contribution to what you want to do here in the city of Emeryville, and I continue to be impressed by what the changes that I've seen in Emeryville since I've lived in the area, and I don't think that could continue or be done without the staff that we currently have, and I don't just, the individuals are awesome, and I'm always amazed by how we manage to hire these incredible people and keep them for years. It's just a really special thing, and I hope we can keep it. So that's my piece.
Thanks, Mary.
Good evening, Mayor and members of Council. I'm Itero, as you know, Community Economic Development Coordinator. I'm responsible for small business, including the art sector as a small business type, but also for several and a wide variety of revenue-generating initiatives. I have to say I don't envy your task. Budgets of this magnitude are complicated, and it's difficult to figure out the best strategy to use. I just have 3 points I'd like to share. Firstly, with regard to effective strategy, when facing a revenue-based issue, it's always a good idea to look at what tools do we already have on hand. Our current budget, for example, describes the city's historic and effective approach to retaining and pursuing sources of revenue, the fundamental lack of which is a large part of the reason we are currently having this discussion. The approach is best described in the introduction to the Economic Development and Housing Budget. Emeryville's economic development programs support and expand the economic base of the city in order to generate revenue, develop jobs, and ensure business vitality. Revenue generation is a fundamental component of the city's economic development strategy. Secondly, the current budget proposal calls for elimination of 2 economic development related positions. Given the small size of our department, this would result in essentially a 30% reduction of the entire division. A strong economy calls for diversification of revenue sources and quality of life initiatives such as the Cultural Arts District. These invite investment. These endeavors require human resources to make them happen. And finally, and forgive me if this quote or its interpretation is somewhat simplistic, but sometimes the best way to deal with a complex situation is to remember the basic framework on the issue or of the issue and entertain solutions that begin with the basics. Absent sufficient support staff, you can do one economic development related task in an excellent manner. You can pursue a small number of low-level strategies in a generally adequate way, but absent sufficient staff, you can only do the type of significant economic development program needed to create a diverse and sustainable economy poorly or not at all. The city's community development and economic development management team is a very capable and dedicated staff. However, they need sufficient support staff to effectively address the current budget crisis and to help the city's economy thrive into the future. As you enter the final round of these budget discussions, please consider the practical staffing needs needed to get the business of the city done and done effectively. And thank you for your time.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm Adrienne Robinson with the Police Department. I'm the crime analyst there, and I just have a few things to say. I think it'll be a disservice to the community to cut my position. I think it would compromise the safety of the citizens if they're not made aware of what's going on in the community, which is what I do when I post statistics on the website, which is also in narrative form. So you actually get to kind of see what's going on behind the numbers. And also, I think I contribute in keeping the city safe working with the officers. It's a joint effort when I'm analyzing crimes and I come up with a pattern or a series of whatever crime that's going on, and I make patrol aware of what's going on and where it is. They can go out and provide those patrols in those areas. I actually drill down the reports. You know, it's more than just a computer spitting out numbers. I actually drill down the reports to find out what is actually going on. And I have an example of a commercial burglary series we had in the north end of town and the south end of town, where there was a suspect who smashed windows to businesses. He used a rock inside of a sock, and he also used a hammer. He would smash the windows and he'd go in and target laptop computers. So several businesses lost a lot of laptop computers. I forecasted when the next crime would occur, time of day, day of week, and where the vicinity of the area. I couldn't pinpoint the exact location, but I pinpointed the area that he may possibly strike. This was within a 95% probability. And put out my patrol bulletin, posted the picture of the suspect that was on the surveillance video. Officers went out and did their patrols. Lo and behold, here's this guy that's in the area that fit the description of the person that was in the photograph that I put on the bulletin that I disseminated to patrol. He was not breaking into anything, but he was in the area and he was about to break into something. So it's a way of them deterring crime before crime happens, and it's because of something that I produced, which helps the community remain safe. And not only that, citizens call me. They want to know what's the crime rate in the city. They want to know, is the area safe? Which area is safe? I'm interested in living here. I'm interested in having my kids go to school here. I provide that information to those citizens. I provide information to the Department of Justice, Gambling Control, who wants to know the crimes that's going on at the Oaks Club. And I just ask that you guys would consider my position. I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. Navarre Oaks, Assistant Planner. I'm going to cut to the chase. Under long-term fiscal strategies, the fourth bullet point states service delivery model changes. Change ways in which city business is conducted to reduce cost, e.g. combine positions and contract services. End quote. Which positions will be combined? Which services will be contracted out? None of this is stated. What I can say with absolute confidence is that combining positions and contracting out services does not bring about change for the better. Combining positions will result in reduced services to the community. Contracting out services cannot be assumed as a cost-effective option, and there is no analysis showing how this would be a cost-effective option. The fifth bullet point states, service reductions. Reduce or eliminate certain discretionary services or programs to save money, e.g. reduce service levels or eliminate programs, end quote. Which services and programs will be reduced? Which services and programs will be eliminated? None of this is stated. The sixth bullet point states, quote, economic development, retain and attract businesses to increase the city's tax base, e.g. enact a general tax on cannabis business, end quote. This budget proposes laying off people from the Economic Development and Housing Division. How are we to simultaneously retain and attract businesses while laying off the very people whose job it is to retain and attract businesses? Which is also a hard phrase to say, so I'm going to say it again. Retain and attract businesses. Let's make this clear. Page 2 of the proposed budget solutions table shows the elimination of multiple full-time employees. These people cannot be laid off without significant consequences. Next to the eliminated Fair Labor Standards position, it says reassign duties to other staff. What other staff? One, we don't have people walking around here twiddling their thumbs. It doesn't happen. Two, more importantly, this requires specialized knowledge. You don't have a child care specialist out doing building inspections or vice versa. Not anyone can just pick up this work and start doing it. Which brings me to the elimination of the crime analyst position. Next to that, it says lower level of response to citizens and shift crime analysis to new CAT software system. This is not a lower level of service. This is no service. Shift crime analysis to new CAT software is a suggestion. If this work could be done at the touch of a button, wouldn't we already be doing that? Eliminating these positions is eliminating services. They cannot be shifted or reassigned to other staff. There aren't other staff available to do these tasks, and these are specialized positions. It's insulting to act as if all the work that is done here is interchangeable. It's not. This inaccurate assumption devalues the work that is done by all employees here. People here work hard. The employees here don't care just about our jobs. We care about how the city functions. We care about the community. We want to see the best possible solutions. These proposals are not the best possible solutions. We can do better, so let's do better.
I thought I would change it up a little bit and end rather than begin the presentation from SEIU. So at the June 20th meeting, we had a proposal that was to lay off 45 employees, occupied positions in both year 1 and year 2. A month later, we are here today with no layoffs in year 1 and 7 occupied positions to be laid off. This statement itself, you can say a number of things about the process. I'm going to say none of them. Instead, what I'm going to focus on rather is what have we done today? We have had 2 presentations from revenue consultants. We have had a committee ad hoc committee formed for revenue generation. Absolutely important. What is the other side of it? That's the cost reductions. What have we done to analyze, to think what costs can be cut? So you have people of the public coming here in front of you asking for $900. Coastal cleanup a day. It's just the staff time spent of 1 or 2 on that one day. Surely there is money for all that. I mentioned this as an example of how there has been no thoughtful process when it comes to cutting costs, not just people, but also events. So, and we, SEIU has proposed how we feel that we can solve this issue without cutting any positions. And, I'm not going to repeat that, but you have to understand, and what others have said is, who's going to do the work? How is, I asked Ms. Claire at the Finance Committee, the Budget Committee meeting, straight up, that who is going to do the Fair Work Week, because that's a huge chunk of specialized work. And the response that I got from her was that, well, that's my job. I will assign duties. Yes, that is her job. That is indeed correct. And so is the budget. And here we are. So I'm going to leave it at that. And, others have talked about, Adrian has come and talked to you several times. The other position that is also being cut and has not been discussed or highlighted that much is the police service technician, the person who's responsible for enforcing parking. We all know there is an issue with that, and as it is, and we are getting ready to launch a paid parking. And it is short-sighted to eliminate the person who is currently doing that and not doing it adequately because probably there's not enough resources. So you're going to increase increase something, but not and take away the person who's going to be doing that. And just one more thing. In terms of revenue, how the focus has been on revenue generation. So in this time around, $50,000 have been allocated to study a service delivery model of police dispatch as a revenue-making measure. $50,000. That gets put on very quickly where there is no evidence that such service delivery models have been successful. I don't see anything. I did a quick Google search. Dublin is the only one that does that in the area, and they they have contracted out the entire police department and not just a specific function of that. So you want to, you may, our recommendation is you save that money and put it on the other revenue measures that the city is going to be doing, such as the bonding, for example. I thank you for your time.
Sharon Wilshire, Chair of the City's Public Art Advisory Committee. You all had a letter from the committee in your packet. But since the last council meeting, something really special has happened in Emeryville and for Emeryville, and I don't know, maybe I missed it, but I don't know that anything has been officially said about it at a council meeting, and that is the large portion of Emeryville is now a cultural arts district, and this is in the state of California, one of 14 cities who have been designated cultural districts by the California Arts Council. Artists are excited about this. I've just finished 2 weekends of studio visits for the annual art exhibition, and I can tell you artists are excited. Residents in the community who follow our creative community are very excited about this. The city staff is excited about the possibilities. The city is the lead partner in this cultural district team and needs to remain the lead with staff to manage and to grow this opportunity. So you have a letter that from our committee urging you and council members and city management not to cut the position that supports the cultural district, that also is designated as one of her tasks is the Center for the Arts. Another one is support for small business, and now just recently has taken on a position as staff to a mural program that's about ready to be announced, part of our public art master plan. So we strongly urge you to reconsider this and to not cut that position. Thank you.
Any further public comment? Okay, I say we take a few minutes break here before we start going through the questions.
Thank you.
Really, what I'm going to do is complain about my chair indefinitely, but I'm going to throw out my buying a new chair. So just make it a problem for someone else to wield any trade. Yeah. I'm perfectly happy. You could have put me in one of those chairs. I've been fine. Oh, yeah. That sounds good. Thank you.
Oh, can I have one?
This is... Yes. You know. Oh, I got the same thing. I know what you mean.
Okay, we're ready to get started again.
I had experience today.
Questions for the City Council. Does the City Council wish to approve a 10% fee increase in year 2 for ECDC?
Could I have a motion?
For discussion. We could discuss first. I think 2 years of a 10% increase is pretty large, and I understand that this is a balancing act and difficult, but I did feel, we have people who have multiple children there. They've just been hit with a 10% this year, if I'm speaking correctly. So I think to do another 10% next year is excessive. I talked to some community members, some parents. I'm sure you got emails as well from them talking about this very thing. And while I didn't say I would come out and strongly against this, I did say I would at least have the conversation of, I understand we have to make difficult choices. I think this has been an evening of difficult choices, but I do want to just say that I feel like 10% over 2 years, or 10% a year for 2 consecutive years is really painful, particularly for parents of multiple kids. So.
I agree. I think, the range and the 5%, and there's a mid-range, were helpful to look at. I think 10% 2 years running when there has not been consistent increases, and that's way out of proportion with what these parents are generally going to be expected to make as cost of living increases or raises at work. It's going to be really difficult to swallow. And so I think I would ask that maybe we can consider the 5%.
I support 10% for several reasons. One, the cost of the Child Development Center, the fees to the parents, did not go up for a number of years. And so for a long time, the reason I think that staff, whether we like it or not, staff proposes changes to the Child Development Center, and it's a target, is because it has had an increasing subsidy as we've moved along. And in my opinion, a 10% increase still made this extremely competitive compared to not just Montessori schools, but to other programs in the area. And to me, that put it was still within a range that was affordable in relation to other costs in the area. And I think subsidizing it at an increasing level year after year actually makes it a target for after we're all here. And I think that if the goal of the council, as we had earlier stated at a prior meeting, was to sustain this as a service for the city, I think that we have to look at what it takes to sustain it. I heard a lot of members from SEIU talk about those types of approaches. And in fact, I sat in as the liaison to the Budget Advisory Committee, and the representative for SEIU favored this increase, and the members of the Child Care Center also told us that they were in favor of this increase. And so I support 10% increase.
I have to concur with Vice Mayor Bowders. I am a parent of multiple children who has experienced the pinch of having two kids in care at the same time, and it is difficult, but ECDC is a fine school. I would rate it up there with Montessori's. In fact, when I sent my son there, I felt like that was the top of the line for my family in terms of the kind of child care that we could expect. I do feel for parents of multiple children. I think that a 10% increase will address a structural deficit that we're trying to fix with not easy decisions. But this is a place where we can certainly ask new students and parents with one child to consider that this is what we need to do to keep this this facility running. I would consider some sort of solution for children of multiple parents, if there's a scholarship or a discount just for those folks, because it's not the majority of people at the center. I would consider that. But I think in light of the greater budget that we're dealing with, I think this is their committees have raised the alarm bell on ECDC for years. Staff has raised the alarm bell for years. And we always come back and we're able to keep everything together, but it's very tenuous and we all need to make contributions. So, we had a meeting in June where ECDC was on the line, and we decided as a community that we want to keep it, that we value those families, we value those children, but we need to make it sustainable.
I also support the 10% fee increase. It's what we have to do to move forward. So I move that we approve.
I'll second the motion.
Can I ask a question real quick? Pedro, do you know how many parents have multiple children in the school?
I don't recall off the top of my head. Maybe Sam might know because she does enrollment. Would you recall?
It's about... Yeah, I would say it's about a fifth of the students. Right now, the incoming infant class, which is 8 spaces, 7 of them are second children. So of the 8, only 1 of them does not have an older sibling that's already enrolled. So that's like the biggest hit for them. What Councilmember Martinez said something. Right now, they do offer a 10% discount for the sibling discount, but it's off the more like the older sibling, which is the lower cost. If there was some kind of appeasement, like a 10% for the whole family, something like that, that would really decrease the pinch, and I think it would be, you know.
I would like to offer, I think it should be 10% across the board, because I think forecasting how many people creates budget uncertainty, but I think that the comments that were made earlier about wanting to make childcare affordable, especially for families that will have a harder time financing this, one of the suggestions I heard at the advisory committee was looking at scholarships and having, we can't build the foundation for sustainability off of the hope and prayer that the business community will finance this, but I do think that it is worth our time, and I know that those who work at the Child Development Center are also very energetically interested in finding scholarship opportunities, and I will personally commit to sitting down with you and talking to people that we all work with in the business community to help you find those paths forward. But I would stick to a predictable model that for at least this 2-year budget, and that was something we all agreed to in the meeting, was that it is not appropriate at this time to examine cost increases beyond 2 years. And so you saw some slides that went beyond that. That was largely due to my request just to see what trajectories look like, but I think that asking for a 10% increase in year 2 is appropriate and necessary if we really want to. It's hard on people, and I get that, but if we really want to actually pull this program away from being in a perpetual position of being chopped, we have to make a sustainable change now. It sucks, but we have to do that. And so I think a 10% increase coupled with a commitment to try to find scholarship opportunities for people who need it is the right path for right now. So that's my motion, or that's my second to the mayor's motion.
So one more quick comment on that, and I think that I understand where this is coming from, and as I opened with, I know this is one of those things, but I'm really looking at you, Pedro, as I think it's time that we sit down and look at the funding of the program, because I agree with Member Bowders, it's not going to be local businesses unless we get lucky and have another partnership. But I do think, we're eliminating a vacant position and keeping our numbers at 80. There are some economies of scale sometimes, and so really looking at that as a way to keep costs down, maybe it does make more sense to fill that position and bring in the number of kids that allows the center to serve. So, and or partnering with other state and federal child care programs. So with that caveat, I'm going to support the 10%, but.
So do we technically need to we made a motion, he made a motion, so do you want us to get direction that way?
Yes, please.
Okay. So there was a motion and a second.
Yep.
Okay, so on the question of whether to increase the fees by 10% in year 2 for ECDC, moved by Mayor Donahue, seconded by Vice Mayor Bowders. Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
Next question. Does the City Council wish to approve the budget manual as is presented, approve the manual as recommended by the Budget Advisory Committee, or different alternatives? Would you like us to put up the menu on the screen? There's 3 pages, so we'll only see one at a time.
So, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to preface what I'm about to discuss with my appreciation for the employees who came to speak tonight. And it's clear that you care about the city, about the community, about each other, and we know that there are serious consequences to whatever decision we make tonight. That said, I do want to address the Budget Advisory Committee's suggestions. One was for animal control services. This is a public health issue. I think I might have mentioned in a recent meeting that there was a dog bite at my apartment complex, And Piedmont Animal Services came to track down the dog, track down the owners, came multiple times with the insistence that they get the dog licensed. And truth be told, and Chief, I hope you could back me up on this, if we did not have this contract, we would not have someone who would be able to come talk to the management of the apartment company, talk to the people who are actually paying the rent, because they weren't paying it directly, it was through a third party, get into the premises and track these folks down. I don't know what the result of this was. However, I know that we're overburdened as it is in our police department, and this wouldn't happen if we didn't have animal services. So, if you follow that to its logical conclusion, people could be faced with unnecessary rabies treatments, for instance, if we were to lose this service. My understanding is that county services are
Bill.
No.
Bill. It's not your time.
Oh. The county services also would not provide the breadth and the depth of service that we require. It's my understanding that we get calls every day for animal services, and I just wanted to highlight this as an area where it's a public health concern. And I agree with the Budget Advisory Committee on pulling this item. On their other item that they pulled, I actually would keep it on the menu.
I agree with that. With the keeping the animal control relationship that we have with Piedmont, I think it is a public health issue. But I don't support filling the extra police position. It's a pretty big item that the Budget Committee recommended.
Yeah, I do not agree with that either.
I would just, for the benefit of the Budget Advisory Committee members who are here, just to add a couple pieces, I agree with Councilmember Martinez and Mayor Donahue on both of those remarks. One of the things that was asked by members of the committee about the animal control contract, they asked several very good questions. One of the questions was how would this service be otherwise provided? We were kind of explained an array of services that exist out there. In the absence of any service, the county is the default, and the county essentially only comes for very serious injuries that result usually in hospitalization. There is, we do have these issues almost daily with calls, as Councilmember Martinez spoke to her own personal experience. I've had, my next door neighbor actually had a similar situation in the past, and the issue is that the police department members are not trained to deal with animals, first of all. Second of, and so we have a regular need. It is a health-related issue that's also tied to public safety, as was discussed by the committee members. But on top of that, there was the fact that in order for us to actually, if we were, there was a couple other pieces contractually. If we didn't have this contract and we didn't want to do the county piece, we would have to acquire all the tools, the apparatus. There's a special, basically like a little wagon for animals and things. There's all kinds of things they have that we don't have that would cost capital money. But on top of that, in addition, there's a contract with Piedmont, and so it's easy to look at this, this amount and say this doesn't seem like a lot, but in the absence of it, if we were to provide it, this amount would very easily be much more than this, because we share a contract with Piedmont where when we were examining a dog park situation with staff earlier this year, it was explained to me that Piedmont uses the service at a 4-to-1 ratio to us, actually. So that we would have a considerable cost on our hand if we undertook this, and it was also the advice of staff. Staff agreed with the recommendation of the committee that this was a contract among all the ones on here that was probably worth keeping. I also I happen to disagree with the good members of the advisory committee about filling the police officer position that's currently vacant. I know that there was one member of the committee who dissented, and I agree with the person who dissented, the union representative on this, and it's not a desire not to put out that that additional police service, but I think that when we look at the totality of this budget, in light of other choices that are being made, I think there's a need to bear costs in other places, and I think that filling this position is incompatible with those things. So I support what Councilmember Martinez has suggested.
I agree with what my colleagues have said about the Budget Advisory Committee's recommendations.
So I think we have enough to make a motion on this.
Would you not like to have any more discussion?
On this entire menu?
I'm sorry, I thought we...
Well,
the whole menu.
No, I know. Is there more we want to
You
talk
think
about?
we could come up with $900 for...
I'd like to speak to that. I'd like to speak to that item. I appreciate everyone who came tonight, and as someone who goes to all the coastal events, and I really appreciate what Lewis had to say. And I had a conversation when I saw this. This item was broken out on this menu because I had some questions about these, and I spoke to Pedro, and I know that it's budgeted at a small amount of money, relatively, $13,000 to $20,000, and it turns out that a lot of these events are just because they're counted against certain staff time to put them together. And when we talked about some of these events, we realized that some of these events are actually several $1,000s of that was police overtime for the triathlon. So a lot of these costs are actually built in, and so if we didn't do police services for the triathlon and we actually used volunteers next year, we would actually cut this back considerably. So I would propose an odd proposal, which is that we actually leave it in the menu as a cut, which could be confusing to the community. You're not investing in these things, but I think what we actually can do, and Pedro, reiterate for me what we talked about earlier, but my understanding is that with staff, we can make this cost neutral. So we're technically cutting it as a line item, but we will find a way to keep these programs through cost neutrality measures.
Correct. We're willing to work together and try to find other measures of donations or sponsorships and even volunteers to make these events happen. So we'll reevaluate and look at it to keep that cost down.
Okay, I like that.
I will volunteer on that item as well, because I think those are really important community features. I heard from Councilmember Martinez about
We're not getting out of the triathlon?
Councilmember Patz's challenge will be renewed, but the dive-in movie I heard was
The dive-in movie was extremely well attended.
The Jazz Festival is in the park, and I think these are critical things for the community. I would leave it in the menu. It's going to confuse people, but I think that we leave it in because there are some administrative costs involved, and the goal there being that we need to innovate at a staff level, and I've asked the city manager to assist in that, if others are supportive, to ensure that these programs are still made available to people, basically by using other tools and resources. This is a low threshold financially, and we can accomplish this. You agree?
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a motion on this?
On this entire menu of cuts?
Yes, on the modifications, keeping the Piedmont Emeryville Animal Services, not funding, not filling the police position, and keeping the rest.
So this is this is not what I envisioned when I ran for city council, that this would be what I would get to do, and this is my least favorite time that I've served. Certainly, this whole process. But what we're looking at is something that other cities are seeing as well, which is steep increases in our unfunded pension liabilities. We're also looking at a leveling off of retail revenue, which this city relies on much more than our surrounding cities. And when you combine that and you look at the arc of where we're going, you'll see that we have a structural deficit that needs to be met. And we have gone through a process where we have evaluated what a menu would look like with ECDC on it, what a menu would look like with our whole dispatch department on it, with those. And we talked with the community, and we took those off the menu. Now we've got a menu that gets us closer to closing those gaps. And it is extremely uncomfortable to consider this. And we're, certainly with the ad hoc committee, we're working to find revenue sources that will help us not get into this position in the future. But honestly, we are due for an economic downturn, and relying on our reserves is not a place that I am comfortable going. And in exploring the idea of tax increment financing, that's, those are ongoing funds, but we don't ever even know how much those are going to be. For instance, if we were to win in our battle with the Department of Finance and get the courtyard cleaned up to our liking, can I even discuss this right now? There are some fine details in terms of where that money would go. So that wouldn't all necessarily come to the city. There may be obligations that we would need to pay for out of that tax increment financing that might go to the successor agency first. Those aren't necessarily going to come to the city's coffers. So we can't rely on things that we don't have. And while we are all working towards the goal of closing those gaps and getting to the right place, what we've got in front of us is a 2-year budget cycle where we've got serious deficits. And with that, I will take the heat and make the unpopular, possibly, motion of accepting the proposed budget solutions with the changes that we just talked about, with pulling out the animal control services, but actually leaving in the community services, citywide special events, knowing that we're going to try to get to a revenue neutral space on those.
Okay, I second that.
Can you go back to the trajectory lines? Because I want to follow up with what Member Martinez just said, because I think there are some things that are very valuable in there, and I agree with them wholeheartedly. The lines. So
I think the first slide at the beginning.
Slide, yeah. So one of the things that I want to point out is the expenditure jump from 15-16 to 16-17. We keep putting this all on pensions, but we had a good time and we brought back a lot of staff, and I'm sad that we're laying off people, and I'm frustrated. But this is one of those things that I don't want to undersell, that we got a little taste of revenue and we grew too quickly. And while I'm convinced and would wager all of my money that the economy is going to go into the crapper very soon, maybe supply side economics is right, and all of a sudden we're in a boom time, I'm going to be saying the same thing of we don't want to grow too quickly. And we want to be very careful on that. And it's fun to hire people. It's really horrible in HR to be the one saying, okay, your job's eliminated. So that's the spike that troubles me, because we all saw this pension thing coming. So I just want to throw that out there. And with that, I will second the motion, if it hasn't been done so already.
He seconded the motion.
Oh, seconded, sorry.
But I would like to make a comment. First, I would like to thank Councilmember Martinez for an extremely difficult but thoughtful discussion of this issue. And I would like to, go, before I somehow forget what I was going to say about what Councilmember Pat said that I agree with. There are challenges ahead, and all these challenges are not due to PERS. They're due to other choices we've made in the past, and the city's obligation is to define the scope of services, and that's hard in a city that's small because many of those services are tied to people. But one of the things that was a little too quickly dismissed out of hand, and I know some people in this room, understandably in their position, feel very strongly about this, but when we talk about the scope of services and the ability to deliver a project versus keep a person, it's kind of a circular argument, right? Because you can't do a project without a person, and people with no projects, you're stubbing your toe on the wall. And so we have a council manager system of government, and that administrative duty to figure out how to place service responsibilities, the scope of services within the staffing structure, is not the purview of the council, in my opinion. We define the scope of services, and the choices that have to be made at the administrative level are empowered to the city manager. And I don't envy having to make those choices, but I do want to add that many people will feel that this is their personal position that's at stake, and this is a piece of services. And the city manager and the department heads have all got the ability, especially since we're not eliminating anything in this proposed motion I'm hearing in year one, have the ability to work with existing staff to make other opportunities available, I think. And I'm going to be paying close attention to that myself. So those are my comments, and I think there's a lot more that could be said about tax increment, but perhaps that's for another part of this conversation.
I want to agree with your comments, and I also, before we come to a vote, I would like to honor something that the union brought up with CIP projects, and I'd like to direct staff, if I have agreement from my colleagues, if staff could come back with looking at some of the discretionary CIP projects, so we can relieve some of that pressure from the general fund, and at your discretion, realize where we can take pressure off of those other cuts that we need to make.
And that would be coming forth in September 5th for the proposed budget.
It's an excellent suggestion that Councilmember Martinez has. I think it doesn't necessarily result in immediate changes, but what it does is it will help us. We're taking a preventative step for future budget that we have to review, to look at the discretionary programs, not to remove them or to remove them, but to also examine the fact that for certain discretionary projects, and for those who aren't familiar, a lot of projects are mandatory in the sense that we have funding that's leveraged from other sources that we have to spend within certain windows of time, or the projects become undeliverable. And so I totally support what you're asking for, because there are self-created costs that come in at an operational year-to-year level for certain projects that are discretionary, and to relieve some of that burden will also relieve any associated burden on staff who have to implement parts of this plan. So I think that instruction is one that we should all support.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And in an indirect way takes some pressure off of increment financing.
Exactly. I think that's a great idea.
Hey, we have a motion and a second.
I heard a motion from Councilmember Martinez, seconded by Mayor Donahue, to accept the budget menu with the changes that were noted. Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
Staff presented 4 options to the Budget Advisory Committee to balance the budget. These are all one-time options, and they have impacts on the general fund reserves and the reserves for other funds. The first option is to transfer an amount from the OPEB fund to the general fund to balance the budget. The city's OPEB liability is not fully funded, but it's well funded. The Budget Committee does not support this option. This slide presents the Budget Advisory Committee's recommended options and ranking. The committee recommend first using the general fund unassigned reserves to balance the budget, then use the vehicle replacement fund if excess funds are available. Tax increment revenue is the last option.
Just to be clear, Susan, this refers to the second year where we still see the shortfall.
Right. That was a discussion at the Budget Advisory Committee. But now we also have a shortfall we may not have a shortfall because we only removed the animal services contract. So 17-18, we should be okay. Yeah, it's only the second year. Sorry about that.
So if I add that 98,000 into the balance on the second year, that puts us at $403,000 is what I'm calculating right now, rough math.
Right.
404.
404? Okay, I was close.
The first year is still okay.
So
we have in general fund unassigned reserves.
Right, it's about 1 million.
I move that we use the general fund unassigned reserve.
Second.
Discussion? Oh.
Thank you.
Do we need to vote on that?
We want to take a vote on that?
We should vote on that.
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Okay, I heard a motion from Vice Mayor Bowders, second by Councilmember Martinez. Councilmember Martinez?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Pats?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Bowders?
Aye.
And Mayor Donahue?
Aye.
Next step, budget adoption is expected in September. The revenue should be completed sometime in December or January. Staff will present the mid-year budget review to the City Council in spring 2018, and the staff will monitor the two-year budget closely. If there are any significant adjustments, we'll come back to the Council. Thank you. Any other questions?
Susan, just as a reminder, any of the occupied positions that are slated for reduction, the effective date on that is not until the last day of the current fiscal year, which is June 30th. During that time, obviously, as the months go on, we will be getting probably in the December-January timeframe. We'll be hearing from our revenue consultants. They will be working closely with your revenue subcommittee and also coming to council to identify opportunities and your priorities. There are a number of, let's just say, moving parts that are going on. As recently as this afternoon, once we got the letter, for example, from SEIU, and talking about some of the potential or looking at things a slightly different way. I believe that we will continue to pursue opportunities to reduce what we have had to cut in any way that is possible through changing condition, perhaps improving conditions, we hope, and the outlook for revenue. So all of these factors are still in play. The staff is committed to advising the council and the community and the staff of any significant changes in our budget condition. We will always be looking for opportunities to provide services using our existing staff where we may find critical need in the future, along with a source of revenue, in other words. So continued moving parts, but clearly we do need to adopt a 2-year budget and get this moving forward. We're very appreciative of the consideration of the council. These are difficult times, and we hope that we can be a part of turning it around.